Well, love is love, and I really do not think that there is a material difference between so when people ask me of my sexual orientation, my standard answer is that I'm sapiosexual. That is to say, I love Homo sapiens. And of course, I'm sure that all of us here are Homo sapiens. And that is the standard answer that I give. And there's some truth in it. It means that when love happens between two individuals, it is not because of some categories or things like that. It is just a natural expression of human nature. On the other hand, family really is a social construct. In Taiwanese history, as I mentioned, that on the immigrants of the Minnan, they have this idea of like blood oath brothers, and it's began as a kind of social ceremony, but then that idea became just what we will nowadays call homosexual couples, not to mention the more than 16 different indigenous nations, each have their own very different ideas of families. And that is partly why when we legalized marriage equality, we took this idea of legalizing only the individual to individual part, leaving the family to family part to cultural interpretations, and that is the transcultural nature of things. And incidentally, it also reduced the resistance from the part of the society that insists on this to people wedding forever, their families wed, kinship, and so because they don't see as threatening as the redefining marriage idea or the proposal of marriage equality. So maybe that's also something that Japan can consider.
You know, what's really positive in the recent years in Japan is that the surveys show that majority of Japanese people now support gay marriage, or equal marriage, sorry. And, you know, for Taiwan, our country, our managing partner in Taiwan, Andrew Fu, has supported that the Taiwanese gay marriage or the equal marriage. You know, I think now it's coming to a point where I think the corporations in Japan could play a bigger role, not just relying on governments to, you know, government entities to support, although grassroots local movements in Japan has been increasing this partnership movement, which is not the same as equal marriage, but it is the first step. I think what I have heard here, as well as in the United States, United Kingdom, and other countries which also now have equal marriage, is this term traditional family values or traditional family. In Japanese, you know, they say dento tekina kazoku, for example, or what is natural. I always question this word traditional. Because tradition is something we create over time, but it also changes over time. And so if you go back in Japanese history, just to talk about Japan, 300 years ago, the shape of love was very different, or expression of love was very different. Or if you go back 50 or 60 years ago, pre-war, there were a lot of early deaths where mothers or fathers would die at a young age, and so the mother or the father may remarry. So what we call as traditional family, with two parents who are married forever until they die at an old age, that is not really tradition. So I really do question that. I don't know, actually, because it evolves so much and I cannot predict the future. But you know, we are moving more from a bigger family to smaller families, and almost individualism. Marriage might mean something completely different, or even meaningless at some point in the future. So I can't tell. But there is also in many people the need to be with someone, or need to feel like they care for someone, or to take the care of health or well-being of someone, there might be this innate nature. So it may not be defined by gender, it may not be defined by social expectation of age or anything. As you know, in the US, it used to only be between the people of same races or something like that. So I think it's a commitment really to help one another, or several people maybe together to raise a child together or something like that. So I'm actually excited about how the definition of what marriage will evolve in the next generation.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm a avid reader of Wittgenstein, the philosopher, when I was young, and Wittgenstein, in his book Philosophical Investigations, proposed this idea of family resemblance, meaning that one word, even though like family, it may mean very different things to people, and we recognize family relationships when we see it, but not necessarily identical or even sharing any common feature with our used term of family in our own family. And so I would say that family, the word itself, is going through this family resemblance part. Whereas the essentialism, that is to say that the family is defined by some essential feature, still exists in some part of our legal code. What we're trying to do nowadays is to relax those essential featureism and making sure that when people feel that they are in a family, we respect their idea of family. And that is, I think, what's important, that is people in the family recognize it as a family, and that's what family resemblance means in philosophy. We in the Taiwanese Cabinet Office, this building, which is called the Executive Yuan. So incidentally, also EY, my email address is at ey.gov.tw, really supports people of various different gender orientation, gender and sexual orientation, and physical expressions and body positivity, and so on, through what we call gender mainstreaming process. This process has been going on in the Executive Yuan in the EY for more than 12 years now, and I think it's a really good example of how organizational innovation can lead to a real change in social impact. Basically, each major bill, each major program that runs for 1 or more years need to pass through the Gender Equality Committee, which is by design one more seat in the civil society organization compared to the minister's seats. And so I think it's 18 civil society experts and 17 ministers. And the committee reviews each and every proposals, bills, and so on to find the gender impact that it may have, negative or positive. And then we build a gender impact dashboard that continue to collect the important statistics even well after the program has run its course. And what this means is that we have evidence-based policymaking that can inform people, and we have a very clear KPI. For example, nowadays in our parliament, there's more than 40% women, and that we have, for example, in our newly constructed buildings, by default, like in my office, the Social Innovation Lab, there's 4 bathrooms, the universal one, the gender neutral one, the female one, and the male one, and so on. And so these starts as small innovations, but through the gender impact assessment and gender equality committee's work, it permeates to all the organizational public servants, even though they would say initially that they work in the Ministry of Finance or whatever that has ostensibly nothing to do with gender equality. They will have to consult the Gender Equality Committee on each and every bills and all the different programs. And that builds into our young public service a progressive viewpoint that their work as public servants are there positively to encourage people to essentially come out and share and enjoy and bring their own personal experiences as their unique contribution to the workforce. And so I think some sort of this kind of exoskeletal gender impact dashboard and evaluation criteria as an organizational innovation, I think is really important.
Well, everything that Audrey just talked about is something that we could learn. Because I think, again, there's a relatively specific focus on gender right now, but binary gender by the Japanese political parties. But the definition of gender is still binary and very specific. So I think your example of 4 different types of bathroom, that shows a lot more flexibility in defining for gender. But in kind of reacting to what you just mentioned, Audrey, in a corporate world, it sometimes feels like we're always competing for a finite resource. And I read about your, the SDG circle, that things are not necessarily polarized, the way you have approached political movements using social media. But there, we always come back to this, we have limited resources. You're spending too much time on LGBT, or you're spending too much time on disability issues or gender. So you need to do more of this and less of this. And it almost always seems like we're competing against each other, where I feel like the intersectionality is where we could start with. What is common? But is there something, a tip that you could give even to the corporate world on how we should try to get away from finite resource, zero-sum game kind of discussion?
Yeah, I always talk to our social innovators in the Social Innovation Lab that because we're giving out awards, the Social Innovation Partnership Award, not to particular organizations, but rather to unlikely partnerships. So building unlikely partnerships is really in the DNA of achieving the SDGs together in Taiwan. That necessarily means that the social innovators, when they're talking to big corporations, instead of talking just to the CSR department, the Department for Social Responsibility, which does have only a limited resource, they instead, I encourage them to talk to the business development department, which would reshape the brand of that particular organization thanks to the influx of new idea that comes out of the social innovations. I will use one example. Our Central Epidemic Command Center, which used to hold a live-streamed press conference every day during the pandemic days. We're now post-pandemic, so but for more than 3 months, they have held these daily press conferences. And I always ensure that this broadcasted live press conference is not only translated into funny memes by a cute spokes dog that you refer to, but also that anyone who have any input from any part of society can just dial this toll-free number 1922 and share their social innovations with the CECC. And there are, for example, a young boy whose family called 1922 saying, my boy doesn't want to go to school because you ration mask and all we got was pink medical masks. And my boy doesn't want to wear pink medical mask because he said he will certainly be bullied in school if he wear a pink medical mask. Now, instead of saying that, oh, we have only finite resources, this is the mask that we have got, what if we give them a white or a cyan or a blue mask? We have limited supply of those masks. We cannot get every boy the color of the mask that they need. We instead just talk to the leadership and open government participation officer from the Ministry of Health and Welfare who lives with that spokes dog, by the way. All he had to do is to take pictures of the dog to translate into a meme. He talked to the Ministry of Health and Welfare saying, what if you all just start putting on pink medical mask the next time you come to the press conference? And they did. And so the participation officer convinced the leadership as a kind of business development with young boys and showing gender mainstreaming solidarity. And they kept wearing pink medical masks for extended days and actually changed all their social media icons and things like that pink. And so the boy became, of course, the most hip boy in the class because only he had the mask that the heroes wear. And that is, I think, a really good example of business development, really reshaping your brand to talk to a new segment of society that used to feel alienated or not connected to you thanks to their own input. So that's just one illustration.